Do you remember, Odin, when in the bygone days, we mixed our blood together? You said you would never drink ale unless it were brought to both of us. This is a quote from the poem Loksena, and it gives us an idea of the attitude of Loki towards Odin and his placement within the Norse gods. Within the poem, there is a feast given to the Norse gods by the sea god Aegir. There is no seat for Loki, and he comes in demanding one at the table, quoting an ancient oath between him and Odin. Odin asks his son to rise and leave the table, allowing Loki to have a seat. You're probably wondering why I opened with a part of the real Loki story when talking about the history of Loki within Assassin's Creed. Well, my intention is to explain Loki in the Valhalla issue more in depth, but one of the original rules of Assassin's Creed was to follow the real history to an extent. The story of the Valhalla issue and Loki maintains this idea by having Loki continue the attitudes of the character that he is based on. A character that feels as though he deserves a seat beside Odin. While Odin is willing to honor it, Loki is still an afterthought. But if you read our title, how are Loki and Basim even related? Are they the same person? Are they separate people? Well, let's get into the Assassin's Creed portion of the insanity. In the universe of Assassin's Creed, there are things called the precursors, or the Isu, or those that came before, depending on your game. I did an entire video on who and what they are, so we're not going to go super deep here. You'll find the link to that down below. But the Isu knew the world was ending, and they tried to find a way to prevent it. One of these methods was the one that we eventually called sages. This would allow someone to be constantly reborn in a new body and be linked to their original Isu state. This became a weird and large element in the lore of Assassin's Creed until the game Valhalla. In the game Valhalla, a new type of sage was explored. We discovered a new tribe of Isu, the ones that became known as the Norse gods. They had a similar idea of resurrecting within the bodies of their own ancestors, but while a sage can be constantly reborn, from what we understand about the Valhalla era Isu, their technology only allowed for one resurrection. Basim is the resurrection of Loki, from Norse mythology within the Assassin's Creed universe. Now, I did want to discuss Basim's history and story, but when I began working on it, I realized that we were missing a key component: his life within the game of Mirage. But his time as Loki, that I can explore now. The Isu are every faction and pantheon that we know within natural history, with some of them crossing over multiple pantheons. By the time we reach Norse mythology, we have three primary factions: the Aesir, the Jotnar, and the Vanir. All of the new Isu are basically the Aesir and Vanir at this time. The older Isu, Juno, Minerva, Althea, and Jupiter, were regulated to being the Jotnar under new names. This gets a little confusing because these groups were just originally precursors. Then we discovered that they were the Greek and Roman gods in Odyssey. And then we discovered that the same individuals are the gods within Atlantis. And now in Valhalla, we discovered that they are the gods that became known as the Jotnar. But while Loki is a member of this original group of Isu, he never actually showed up prior to Valhalla that I can find. I just wanted to clarify which faction he actually fits into, and Althea kind of becomes important. Now, even though he is a member of the Jotnar faction, he befriends and becomes blood brothers with Odin. He is a trusted advisor alongside Tyr to Odin in his journeys. Within the game, we never meet Loki's wife, but at some point, he starts a relationship with Althea. In classic Norse tales and mythology, she would most likely be going by the name Engoboda, which I'm sure I butchered the pronunciation of. In classic Norse mythology, Engoboda was the mother of the three children that Loki has away from his wife, and these are Fenrir, Jormungandr, and Hel. Fenrir is the important one for our story. Loki would sneak out of Asgard regularly to see his wife and child in Jotun, but eventually decided to smuggle his son into Asgard. He received help from the Builder, another of the Jotnar, who had plans of killing Odin. It was when he was leaving to get Fenrir into Asgard that he was told of a new plan from the Capitoline Triad. This group is Minerva, Juno, and Jupiter, and they've basically been creating all the different plans to save their race from extinction. They're brought up a lot when I go into the Isu history. But anyway, they've come up with a plan that will give the Isu a chance of survival at the end of the world. This is their 7th plan, so if you want to hear about the other ones, check out our other video. The end of the world is known as the Great Catastrophe, Or it might be Ragnarok. It gets a little confusing because it seems like Odin is calling the Great Catastrophe Ragnarok, but then we have an entirely separate DLC known as the Dawn of Ragnarok, and it gets a little confusing whether or not it was actually Ragnarok or not. But regardless of all of that, Odin didn't believe the Triad's new plan, because the Triad had failed many times before. At the time of this particular trial, being the 7th attempt, that means that they failed 6 times prior. Loki then used an attack on Asgard as a way to sneak his son into the Well of Urdur. Eventually, Odin and Tyr discover Fenrir, and they chose to chain up the boy. At this time, they didn't know Loki was the father. But once Fenrir broke free, an epic battle between Fenrir and Odin ensued. Loki rushed to the aid of his wounded child, and everyone knew how Loki was related to him. Odin didn't quite know what to do at this time, as a prophecy had foretold that he would die at the hands of Fenrir. Out of fear of this prophecy beginning, Odin chained Fenrir back up, and then he killed the builder after discovering his plot, and then he left to find answers on how to survive the Great Catastrophe. Loki eventually became outraged at the way that his son was being treated, and he decided to manipulate the Muspelus into poisoning and killing Balder, the son of Odin, as a form of revenge. A son for a son. Odin left for a way to revive his son, and that's when Loki and Althea devised a plan to steal the mead. Now, the mead is what the 7th method of survival was being called in the Norse mythology version of the story. This method of survival was created by the Triad and then stolen by Odin. This was the method of creating sages, or creating the resurrections of the Norse gods. Again, it's the same method and not. When I looked into it online to see exactly why the Norse version didn't work the same as the Sage version, it's thrown into 2 different methods. One, it's thought that the version that he stole is an early version of the technology, and therefore it hadn't been completed to the point of allowing them to constantly resurrect. Or it was slightly messed with when Odin grabbed it, thus breaking the permanent resurrection theory. Either one could be true. We don't truly know. They leave it vague. While they were trying to steal this mead, Althea became gravely injured, resulting in Loki using another of the Triad's methods of salvation. He downloaded her mind into a Staff of Eden, where she lives to this day. Now, there are multiple Staffs of Eden within the Assassin's Creed lore, but this particular staff is the one used by Cassandra in Atlantis, the one that can allow its bearer to live forever. I'm pretty sure that this is the intended Staff of Eden, and quite a few of the other ones are just random powerful staffs in the lore of Assassin's Creed that have kind of taken the name of the Staff of Eden. Anyway, Althea and Loki had a plan to be reunited, though Loki knew that his resurrection would take eons, and then he went through with the final part of his plan. On the day of the Great Catastrophe, Odin and his 8 Asgardians uploaded their minds into Yggdrasil to become reincarnated later in life. Loki waited until the Asgardians were uploaded and then rushed in. He killed all of the guards and killed Heimdall, taking his place at the table. This allowed Loki to become Basim through reincarnation. So eons later, Basim was born and is the resurrection of Loki. Basim would then go on his own adventure in his own game, Assassin's Creed Mirage, and by the time we get to Valhalla, he has fully accepted that he is Loki. So he enters Yggdrasil in an attempt to once again get revenge on Odin for everything. There's a battle between Eivor and Basim, which ended up with him being uploaded into the Yggdrasil, where he would perish forever connected to it. Except, many years later, Lila brought the Staff of Eden back to the Yggdrasil. It was gifted to her by Cassandra, and it still contained the consciousness of Althea. Once it touched Basim, he was revived, leaving Lila there to be uploaded forever in his place. He then left with the staff, returning to the Assassin's Order that he had once been a part of. It's there that he spoke with Althea within the staff, showing that he still remembers the days of Loki and Althea. And that is the story of Loki within the universe of Assassin's Creed, at least as far as we know it at the moment. Make sure you stick around to this channel, as I'll be going over Odin and the general Valhalla issue next, and we'll also be exploring all of the sages, the lore of the Staff of Eden, and Althea, and many other elements of the Assassin's Creed lore. Thank you for watching the video, and I hope you learned something.